if God made us and he pursues us, does that mean that he needs us to feel good in a relationship? Let's explore that.
And it's really simple because if you start with the wrong perspective, you'll make the wrong choice. I'm not out to hurt anyone's feelings, but between politically correct or correct, I'll choose the last.
Hello and welcome to the Chris F. Walker Podcast. I am Chris F. Walker. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's so beautiful to get to see your face here today. I mean, you can see my face. I can't see yours. Regardless, the point is, I'm glad you're here, and I'm really excited to get to share some of these viewpoints that we've been sharing in the last few podcasts. If you haven't checked in on the last few episodes, we've really been diving into some of the apologetic style arguments that people tend to come across. And I've been diving into them in a little bit more detail to try and give some perspective about how these can really play out in terms of a Christian worldview. Now, today, we're going to kind of close up that series and wrap up that for a little bit before we move on to some other topics. But what I want to talk about today is we're going to talk about the Trinity itself, because that's something that kind of, how does three become one, and how is it that they're three independent but still one independent, and how does that work? And then also, exactly how is it that God tells us the relationship, the seeking of him pursuing us as far as a relationship really play out? We're going to be talking first about the Trinity, and I'm going to try and use this analogy. This is where it gets, boy, we can go a lot of places with this, and it can be hard to wrap our head around it. So I'm going to be coming at it from a few different angles, because if you understand this side of it, and then you understand this side of it, and you understand that side of it, and as you start putting this all together, you start seeing that there is this kind of interwoven way where it all works, where independently it might not seem that it does. So the first one we're going to talk about in terms of the Trinity is I want to kind of identify who each of them are. Now, in the Bible, we actually see the Trinity over and over again. In fact, many times when they're doing a praise or a prayer towards God, you'll see them use the phrase, holy, holy, holy. And the reason they say it three times is because of the Trinity. They're saying holy to each one, but also the idea of a holy as one. Now, holy itself means separate from, meaning it's not part of, totally untouchable, unchangeable. Now, if you didn't get a chance, I highly recommend you go back and you check out what's called the outside truth, the little podcast we did a little while back, and it talked a little bit about how that outside perspective plays in terms of how we determine what is true versus what's right versus what's wrong. And a lot of fun in that one. I really enjoy it. But today I want to talk about the Trinity itself and how this plays out, because when we say holy and we say separate from, it's so interesting because the first thing that comes to our mind usually as we hear separate from is we think of the actual separation. We think of it's not part of us, although the reality is God's as much a part of everything here as he ever has been to an extent. There's a separation, and we have to kind of explore that. For example, in the initial stages of the Bible, Adam and Eve were walking hand in hand with God himself in the garden, meaning that God physically has a presence. But what's not required is that God does not have the physical restraints that we do. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, in order for things to exist, there has to be time, space, and matter. One of the key elements in that is time. Now, according to the Bible, God is outside of time. He does not exist within it. He, in fact, created it. It would be like saying that I created this car, and because I created the car, I'm not in it. It works the way I made it, but I'm still separate from it. Make sense? So God created everything, and everything is his car or his, machine of some kind, and he built it to work a certain way. Now, as it works in that way, he is not restricted by it. So time being one of those elements, God was around before, he is currently here, and he's already in the future. And there's a whole different argument to go into that one about what it means for, if God already knows everything and predestined, and do we really have free will? That's a whole different argument. I would love to have it, just not this time, okay? But I want you to understand that context is that in order for the Christian mindset of the Christian God, the Christian Judeo God to really play out, we have to understand that he is separate from time. Okay? Time does not affect him. The other way around. He affects time. And he decided a long time ago to start it at that point and then have it move forward literally 1 second intervals at a time. He's the one who determined how fast time goes. That was his creation. Okay, so in the terms of time, the reason why that's important is because as we start also understanding that if he's separate from time, in the terms of space and matter, the other three elements of existence, he is separate from them as well. Meaning he has the ability to take up space, but he is not confined by any measure of space. You cannot put God in a box. And at the same time, God could, if he wanted to, be entirely within that box. That's because he's got the ability to do with it whatever he determines. It's his creation. He determines the parameters. And if it's wrong, he twists it however he wants it. That's the point of the authority that God has over in terms of creation. And then the same thing with matter. God can be matter, but is not confined by matter. There is one exception. And that was in the Trinity, at one point God decided to send his son, one of the three, into human form and take on complete human matter. But he was still part of the Trinity. He is still the Son. He stepped into time, into space, into matter, and he was restricted by all those restrictions, and he did it voluntarily. Okay, so time, space, matter, God is outside of all of it. So who exactly are Father, Son, and Holy Spirit? Well, as the Bible explains it to us, the summed up way of doing this, and please understand, I'm not trying to give a sermon on this. I'm trying to just give us a reference that we can wrap our heads around a little bit so that we can at least move forward. But understand this, understanding the Trinity is something that has been tried and failed for generations. So you just need to kind of get enough of a reference that you can start understanding why these things why you see them play out over here in other areas. Okay, so we just need those references. So the first one is God the Father. Now, God the Father is kind of the head of the household. He's the one who thinks of and accomplishes. It's his will that works out in the world. He's the one that decided that when the car was going to be made, this was how he was going to make it. He chose the architecture. Okay, and he also has a plan. He has a design in mind for all past, present, and future. So he's the big one. However, he's also one of three because the other two are just as much one as he is. Yeah, I know. But stick with me. God the Father is the one who's making the decisions. Now, if you come out of a military background, this is how I've kind of used to help bring it home for me. If you understand structure, if you understand echelon, chains of command kind of thing, even in the business sector, you'll see this. You have your manager, they have a boss, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, the God the Father is like the CEO. Okay, he's the head guy, makes all the decisions. Ultimately, it's his choice. Okay, he's the general. But he also has another person, exact same as him, who fills a different role. And that role is God the Son. God the Son is Jesus Christ. He's the one that came down and actually came into human form. The Bible also refers to him as the Word. He's the doer. He's they called him the host of angels. The point is, when we see Jesus in the Bible, what you see are actions being performed. What you see are legitimate things occurring. Okay, so the burning bush talking to Moses, that was probably Jesus. The actual bush itself burning, that actual flame, was probably Jesus. Okay, on that same note, the man who comes down and talks with Abraham, that was probably Jesus. Okay, the host of angels that came down and rescued Israel from the invading armies, that was Jesus. So Jesus is the doer. He's the enactor. And that's why when we hear the creation story, what you hear is God speaking creation. And it's the Word that is making things happen. So God is orchestrating it. God the Father is orchestrating it. And then Jesus is the one doing it. He's the action verb. Okay, and then you have the Holy Spirit. Now, the Holy Spirit is a little bit interesting because we see the Holy Spirit doing a couple different things, especially throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. And what mostly happens is the Holy Spirit is the one that indwells directly into us. Okay, so what you'll see in the Old Testament was they say that the Holy Spirit basically fell down, came down on, and entered into somebody. And then when we see Jesus doing his sacrifice on the cross, what that does is the veil is torn and the way to God is open. And what he says is that our bodies now become the temple where the Holy Spirit can reside. The Holy Spirit is the emotional connection that kind of links us to God. Now, it's through Jesus to God via the Holy Spirit, if that makes sense. And again, I know this is, it's mind-boggling for me too, but that's why I'm trying to take some time to at least give you some reference points to wrap your head around before we start going into some of these other elements. Because what we're really discussing today specifically is going to be how that legality, that legalistic viewpoint of religion is ultimately contrary to the concepts that are taught in what is the Holy Trinity. So if we take that analogy of who the Holy Trinity is, again, we're going to think of it in this military term. You've got Father, God the Father is the general, and then you've got God, Jesus, the person. He's like the sergeant or the captain who's right there with you doing the mission. He knows the mission from the Father, and he's enacting it, and he's leading us to take part in it. But there's one other cool part, is he's also the one who's right beside us. He's like, it's like our best friend. Okay. The one who is, if I'm a private in the military, he's the other private because we got to rely on each other. And I know he's going to be there to watch my back. The sergeant has the mission in mind and he's going to execute, but the one who's actually really right there with me, even when I feel like I'm alone, I have someone with me. That's the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the one who's right there with you the whole time. And then you got to wrap your head around this. You've got the general, the sergeant, and your friend in the trenches. And the reality is they're all the same person. So that's why they're able to do things correctly within themselves, is because the guy who's making the decisions is also the guy who's leading you, is also the guy who's right there with you. So I know it's a little weird to kind of wrap your head around, but the reason why you have to understand that is because they are able to function independent of each other, but they choose to always rely on each other. So they're able to, but they choose to rely on each other, okay? So stick around, because when we come back, we're going to be diving into why God pursues us, okay? And we're going to use one of the fables, one of my favorite ones, called the Prodigal Son, to kind of understand how that plays out, okay? Stick around.
Please don't forget to follow and review the show today. Also, head over and register at the chrisfwalker.com website. There you'll find links to the Indiegogo and Patreon campaigns, which help keep this show going. You'll also find links to the bookstore, gear shop, blog, and you'll stay up to date on upcoming events and live appearances. Now, let's get back to today's message.
And welcome back. I'm so grateful that you're here today. We're talking about one of the weirdest concepts of Christianity. How is it three separate beings are still one God? And how does that play out in terms of why he would pursue us in terms of a relationship? Because that's what we hear in the Christian worldview, is that God pursued us. That's why God came down in the flesh. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. So the idea is that he came down and he gave to us. He pursued us so that we could be made right to him. And the question that a lot of times we tend to, I guess, misconstrue is, why would God do that? And I've heard some arguments that what God is doing as he pursues us is he's seeking to be worshiped, as though it's a self-need that he has to have filled. He wants us to worship him because it's something that makes him feel good. And I don't mean that it does feel good for him, but it's not that he needs it. You see, what we really kind of screw up when we come at it from that context is we forget that about the Trinity. The Trinity has been at all the way from the beginning. In the beginning, God, who loves perfectly and is able to operate and function separately from himself in terms of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, is able to love himself in a way that would far exceed anything we could ever give him. Meaning he does not need our love. He's fine without it. He doesn't need it. So the only reason he would pursue it afterwards is for the ability to love on us. He wants to love us, not the other way around. He doesn't want us to love him. And I know the Bible says that he wants us to love him, but I'm saying that in the context of what is needed, it's not needed that we love him for his gain. What's needed is that he loves us for our benefit. And that's what I'm going to share a little bit with the prodigal son. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I just want to give you the summed up version. But the summed up version of the story of the prodigal son is that two brothers are both loyal to their father, and the father's very rich. And what happens is one of the sons, the younger son, says, "Father, I want my inheritance now. I don't want to have to wait for you to die for me to get what belongs to me." And what the father does is he actually gives it. He gives the prodigal son his inheritance. And the prodigal son runs off and he squanders it, and he wastes it all on stupid things, and decides, you know what, I've realized now that my father's servants, the people who serve my father, have a better life than I have made for myself now because of the mistakes I've made. So he actually just commits that he's going to go back to the father, beg for forgiveness, and even say, "I'll be your servant." He says, I don't want to be your son anymore because I'm not worthy of that. I've wronged you. And he goes back, and what happens is, as he's coming back, the father sees him, drops what he's doing, and takes off at a dead sprint to go embrace the son who came home. And when his son is saying, "Father, I'm just here to beg your forgiveness, and I'm sorry, and I'll work it off," and all the father says is, no. We're throwing a party because my son is home. He says, "I'm grateful that you're back. I can't tell you how happy I am." Now, to the other son, the older brother, he sees this and says, "Dad, I did everything I was supposed to. I never broke the rules. So why is it you're rewarding him with a big banquet? I never got a banquet. I did everything right." And what the father tells him, in essence, is, "Listen, what is mine is already yours. I love you and you have it. You don't need to ask for it. It's yours. Because out of love, I'm sharing it." And then on top of it, he says, "And I would certainly rejoice at the son who comes back." So I want to break down a little bit these three elements. Now, most people understand the prodigal son, because ultimately it's the walk faith most of us Christians actually endure. We wanted something that was probably not ours to have at the time. And even if we got it, we went and squandered it, and we did something too. And we basically know that we wronged the person who we shouldn't have. And as we come back, we're doing so in humility and humbleness and meekness, in the hopes that he'll just let us work our way back into rightness. And he says, that's not how it works. Welcome home. He says, "I'm welcoming you back. It's not about you working for it. Welcome home. I love you." And then there's the older brother. And he says, "I don't get it. I did everything I was supposed to. I followed all the rules. How come I'm not getting a reward?" And what the father has to remind him is, you have the reward. You're just looking at the wrong stuff. You're still fixated on the same things he was. You want the things. And that's not the reward. The reward is the relationship with the father himself. That's what the father is trying to convey to both his sons. Your actions, your choices will not change how much I love you, how much I desire and want you in my life, how much I want to be able to love on you. And what that means is that both of the sons, are trying to make amends through deeds and actions what was never meant to be an action. It's a relationship. When the first one says, "Father, I'll work my way back to rightness with you," he says, that's not how it works. I forgive what you've done. Welcome home. And then the second son says, "That's not fair. I did everything right. I did. It's all about the actions." And what he says is, "I want my reward." And he still thinks the reward is again going to be the things, the value of profit. And that's not it. The father's saying, you already have everything I have is yours. I'm going to give it to you. That's not what this is about. Just know I love you. Be content in the love I have for you. That is the ultimate point. And why do we need to understand the Trinity to understand that? That's the point. You got to understand that the Trinity means God does not need our love. He wants to share his love in a way that we benefit. And when we come home, when we understand what it means to be a child of God, we get to come home and share, not just in the relationship with the Father, but he's already going to share the things that he deems are worthy for us to have. And that's where we get into trouble. What if we want more than he's willing to give? Maybe he says, this is what I want to share with you. And we say, well, how come I can't have more? That's human nature. And we have to remember that the focus is not on the stuff God gives us. It's on God himself. I don't remember what... there's a beautiful song lyric out there, and I think it's by Matthew West. And I wish I could remember the song, but what it basically says is, I let your gifts take the place of you. And what a profound knowledge that ultimately is. If we understand, most people who are seeking a relationship with God are still trying to be the older brother. If I do it right, he'll give me stuff. If your focus is on the gifts of God, you're missing the point. It's about God. It's about the relationship with God. And nothing will ever satisfy you short of that. I hope this was an inspiring message for you guys. Share what your thoughts are down in the comments. And by the way, please subscribe again. I love each and every one of you guys. Can't wait to see you again. Take care.
I realize your time is the most precious commodity you could possibly share with anyone. So I want to thank you again for spending some of yours here with me today. Don't forget to review the message for others. And be sure to follow the Chris F. Walker podcast for new releases. Remember, your generous support on sites like Indiegogo and Patreon are making this show possible. Don't forget to register at the chrisfwalker.com website for links to the bookstore, gear shop, and to stay updated for new events and appearances. I hope to see you again soon. God bless.